In this world, is the destiny of mankind controlled by some transcendental entity or law? Is it like the hand of God, hovering above? At least it is true that mankind has no control, even over his own will. Thank you so much for tuning in, and welcome to another episode of the Men of ZEN, an anime research podcast. My name is Brent.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Aiden.
I am so excited to do Berserk. I have been binging this for the last 2 weeks. If you do not know about this show, you absolutely should. It is legendary and has influenced so many things. Again, we're talking about Berserk, Berserk by Kentaro Meora. Phil, you had not seen this at all, and I don't know if you even finished it, right? But you're still in the middle of it. And what did you think so far?
So yes, I am absolutely in the middle of it, and pardon my voice, I am getting a little bit over a cold here.
Yep.
But honestly, Berserk's huge. It's incredibly popular, very famous anime and manga, and you're right, it has absolutely influenced a lot. And you're right, also, I have not finished it, but from what I have watched, I really like it. It doesn't like drip feed. It doesn't like feed you like everything up front about the story. It's very well paced. I'm watching the animated movies on Netflix right now, and been really enjoying those. And I know those are a prequel to the 2016 series, which is the most up to date version of it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really brutal watch sometimes. Like some things are. I mean, it really does get violent and gory. It has a lot of sexual content that is above and beyond. But this series takes place in like a medieval time where things really are that brutal. And unfortunately, this story really doesn't have much of a happy ending. It's only just people suffering, and then at the end they suffer more.
Right.
Aiden, now you'd seen this, and I know you're a big fan. Tell me your initial thoughts on Berserk.
Yeah, definitely. So it is, in my opinion, like a very gory, action-packed, dark fantasy anime. For me, so when I first got into Berserk, a friend recommended it to me, and I kind of put it in the back burner before, because when I first saw the trailer, I was like, oh, it's like medieval anime, some guy swinging a big sword, cool. So I kind of skipped on it, and then like a couple years later, when the 2016 series came out, one of my friends was like, hey, you should come over. We're going to watch some anime on Crunchyroll. I'm like, cool, whatever. I came over and he just started playing Berserk. I was like, oh, okay, it's this show. I'll give it a shot, whatever. And then, like, I saw Guts just come out of nowhere and just swinging this huge sword. And I just heard the clang of his sword, like, crushing through skeletons.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like,
that sound over and over. We'll have a clip of that later, I believe.
Yeah, and I was just like, man, that's actually kind of cool. And yeah, and then so after that, a couple episodes there with my friend, I went home and watched, like, the rest of it. And I just love the universe, the world building for it. Like, I love all the demons, yokais in it, the gore, I love the weapons in it too, just the overall theme too. It just got me hooked, and overall, yeah, I just really enjoy it. It's a very dark fantasy anime.
Right. Now, this features the main character of Guts, and Guts is like the Dark Swordsman, and when I say the Dark Swordsman, I mean any character that you've almost ever seen in any anime TV show that is about a character that wields a sword that is clearly too big for any normal human to be carrying. They were almost definitely influenced by Berserk, almost 100%. Again, this world is so brutal. It's insane. Like you said, that clang of his sword is just absolutely iconic. Do you have a clip of that?
I don't right now, but I can pull it up here.
Okay, yeah, you're good. No worries, man. We'll get a clip of that up here in a minute. Yes, Phil, what do you got?
I was just going to say, this world is absolutely rated R, but Guts' hands are rated E for everyone.
Yeah, you're gonna catch him, especially in the 2016 series when you find out that his left arm is gone, and he replaces it with almost kind of like, Full Metal Alchemist. It's just a machined-made arm, but within that arm, his hand can drop down, and he's got a cannon. He has a crossbow attached to it, so he's got a bunch of other weapons at his disposal there. Really cool. Now, Aiden, why don't you, at least for now, you had a bunch of notes on Berserk and just the general anime, I guess. I don't have a ton of notes on the actual show. but I do have a pretty general knowledge of a lot of these characters. Some of these are absolutely iconic. Now, if you've seen any, I mean, there's a ton of memes about it too, with Guts and Griffith and their relationship. Just not the, like, it really is iconic in terms of how I think you said it best earlier when, like, Griffith is one of the four horsemen of did nothing wrong. He absolutely does some stuff wrong, but he'll never admit it because in the end he gets what he wants, and it's just phenomenal. Aiden, why don't you tell us about what the world of Berserk is?
Yeah, definitely. Now, if you haven't seen the Berserk anime, I totally recommend reading the manga first. They cut a lot of stuff out in the anime, like how they usually do.
Yeah, I did notice that. Yeah. The manga is definitely longer. The shorter version of this, if you want to watch Berserk, a great way to get some of the meat and potatoes of the series is to watch on Netflix currently the 3 movies. I believe they're called The Golden Egg. The Golden Egg arc, or is it Golden Age?
Just the Golden Age arc.
The Golden Age. But they have 3 movies of that on Netflix, so you can watch sequentially. They're only about an hour and a half long each. Phenomenal films. Love the new animation that's updated from the original series that was made in the early 90s. Go ahead and tell us about the story of Berserk.
Yeah, definitely. But real quick, going back to the manga though, like the reason why it's a little better too, just because it doesn't skip much, and then like the details, the way he draws his manga panels, they're just so much detail in them. He brings his character to life. Like the way he does it, it makes it feel like it's a real dark fantasy feel with the manga for that. And then for the anime itself, I really enjoyed it too. I started off with the anime. I would say the pacing of it itself at first was a little slow, but then once it started picking up, it just kept getting better and better. So the story, obviously, as we said before, is set in place in a very dark fantasy world, with aesthetics leading towards Western medieval fantasy style, with the stone castles, rusty armors, and whatnot. So it focuses around a mercenary named Guts, and he's one of the most badass characters out there. The dude's like 6'3", 230 pounds. He has a mechanical arm. So the mechanical arm itself houses like a single-shot cannon. That cannon is strong enough to blast a hole through like any demon. It also holds a repeating crossbow, and he also has an arsenal of throwing knives and mini bombs in his pouch. He also wields the iconic Dragon Slayer sword. So this weapon is massive, man. So this thing was too big to be called a sword, too big, too thick, too heavy. It was too rough. It was more just like a large hunk of iron, right? So the sword originally was laughed at and thought to be unusable by anybody because of the sheer size of it. Until a guy named Guts came along, right? So the sword sits around 6 feet and 6 inches in length and weighs a little over 400 pounds. And Guts wields this thing like a feather. He just like swings it around.
Oh yeah, I've seen him like hammer into dudes repeatedly, just in straight like up and down motions.
Right.
Like that, no. Yeah. But he's gone through so much training. Right. It seems like every time someone sees him do this, they're like, no way, he shouldn't be able to wield that. It's nuts.
Yeah, and the sword actually itself has bathed in so much demonic blood that it can kill supernatural beings because it rests in both the physical and astral planes, which is really cool. So he can just slay ghosts, demons, skeletal, anything that is supernatural basically. So Guts himself was born from the corpse of his lynched mother hanging from a tree, where he was left to die alone in a pool of blood and afterbirth. But a mercenary group led by a man named Gambino eventually, came upon that grisly sight. When we saw baby Guts he began to cry and stuff, and he got attention of this girl named, I believe her name was Shishui. She was Gambino's like kind of main squeeze at the time, right? Okay. So she took in baby Guts, and kind of
baby Guts.
She took him in, and Gambino was like, whatever. He was kind of hesitant against it because he thought it was a bad omen, baby in the pool of blood and afterbirth, from a dead body. Yeah, so he took him in, and then like a couple years later, she actually died from the plague, right? So Gambino started mentoring him and kind of began training Guts in swordsmanship at a very young age. So, and they didn't have baby-sized swords, right? So they just had like adult-sized swords. So like, so he started training with like huge swords for a kid his age, and that's probably why he got so used to wearing like big weapons like that, and just like used to in the strength he came just from training every day with his mercenary group since a young age. And then he also was very constantly abused by Gambino. He was like physically abused, kind of belittled, because Gambino didn't really like him or want him around. He kind of just had
does he like blame him for like the death of his wife kind of?
Yeah, he kind of blames him for that, and he kind of just like blames him for everything basically. So Guts eventually is forced to kill Gambino, which is like his only father figure in his life, because in self-defense, because Gambino basically had a big mental breakdown and tried to kill Guts, essentially. So then after that, Guts kind of became a lone mercenary. He kind of left that group because they all thought, like, oh, he killed his, Gambino, the guy who raised him since kids. They all kind of tried to go after him, but he left. So he later down the road, he's his own mercenary kind of guy. There's a big battle going on, and he killed the main leader. His name was like, oh my gosh, I forgot his name.
Not Bazuso.
But yeah, I think something along that line.
I think he might be the 2016 one, but yeah, I know there is another man like
Bazuzo or something like that.
Yeah, there is Bazuso, but yeah, so I remember some of this that it's like there are some characters in this world where they are like supposed to be larger than life, and they are like legendary to the men or the country that they represent, and Guts comes up to fight him, and they're like, we're gonna show this young punk who's boss, and they bring out like the big bad guy right away, and Guts just takes him to town, and they're like, holy shit.
Yeah. Because they didn't expect a young Guts at the time, because he was like, I don't know, he was young teens, I would say, around this age, and he had a huge sword. It wasn't the Dragon Slayer sword, but it's still huge.
Right.
And then they fought. I would say Guts plot armor. Guts why he survived that fight.
Yeah, of course.
Because he basically fought this guy. His axe got chipped, and the axe broke. And the axe, if it didn't break, he would have been decapitated.
Oh yeah, that was in the movie too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so eventually he defeated him, and then he caught the attention of Griffith, right? So Griffin is the leader of this mercenary group called they're known as the Band of the Hawk. So Griffin's like, this guy's kind of cool. I kind of want him. And then a couple of his men try to jump Guts later on because he got the reward money from the mercenary fight, and they wanted it. And so they try to jump him, but Guts kind of easily defeats him. And then Casa comes up, tries to fight him, and then she kind of struggles with him, and then Griffin has to come into the fight and then basically defeats him. Knocks him unconscious. He wakes up in the group with the Band of the Hawk.
Yeah, and that fight is really important because that really is how, like you mentioned, Casca, which is kind of seen as like the second in command, and the Band of the Hawk. A lot of these people look up to her for her leadership, and her and Guts really form a really interesting relationship through the series where they heavily rely on each other, and slowly over time Guts kind of becomes more of the leader as he proves himself in all of these battles again and again. But that fight with Guts and Griffith is really interesting because Griffith is more of the elegant rapier kind of swordsman where he's all about finesse.
He's got that dexterity build going on.
Yeah, he does. He sure does. He's definitely more dexterous. He's just as quick. Guts has like a few like decent opportunities to take him down, but in the end, Griffith does win this fight. But Griffith is a lot more, I would say, forgiving. He doesn't necessarily see him as a foe that he needs to kill. He just wants to put him in his place. And at the end of that fight, it's really great. I love it where he has Guts down on like one knee, and he's like, "I'm about to kill you," and he just like whispers to him, he's like, "You belong to me now."
Right.
And I'm like, oh damn. And like Guts really does concede. He knows when he's been beat, and he's like never been beaten so badly before that he's like, okay. And I do know after that it does kind of a time skip, at least in the movie arc. There's probably a bunch more that happens in between, but it really does jump right to like a couple years where Guts is now this prominent leader within the Band of the Hawk, and everyone's looking up to him. They're like, hey Guts, you did a great job out there, but he still has this just natural bloodlust that he can't get rid of. Like, even though he's supposed to be a leader, one of the things he still like loves to do is get out onto the battlefield, especially if it's alone. He's the kind of guy where there's an episode where he goes into like a forest and he is ambushed by like over 100 men, and he thinks he is like gonna be taken down. But in the end, by the time the Band of the Hawk finally finds him, because they realize he's been alone out there fighting, they walk onto a battlefield of just corpses everywhere. And they're like, did he do this all by himself? And he's like heavily wounded, but it's insane that this one person took down all these people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
it definitely seems like if I were just, because I'm not that far into it obviously, and I'm not as well versed in the lore and the anime and manga, but it definitely feels like Guts has this almost like a death wish where he keeps putting himself up against odds where he doesn't think he's going to win,
right?
But he pushes himself, and he eventually does win.
Yeah, he's a very reckless fighter. He puts himself in danger all the time, and he's just like whatever. He doesn't care if he gets hurt as long as he like gets what. As long as he wins essentially.
He lives for that like life and death scenario where when he truly shines when his back is up against the wall. And I remember the second fight that was really interesting in terms of Guts figured he was going to be defeated. Nosferatu Zod. You remember that he shows up as kind of just this they go into a cave and they're exploring this cave, and inside it is this really large man at first that they just think is this person, but slowly through this fight against this large muscular entity, the entity reveals that he's actually hundreds of years old. And Guts is how is that possible? And he's well, demons exist, and this demon is so impressed with Guts that he's I've never had to use my full strength before, when he finally transforms into his full demonic form, which he's a really big gnarly minotaur guy, and oh man, everybody's there is fucked. That is one of the only fights where I've ever seen that Guts inevitably loses and they have to run away. He is heavily injured. Griffith and his Band of the Hawk, the only way they can deal with it is they distract it enough so that they can run away. Nosferatu Zod does make an appearance later, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
Yeah, I think Zod kind of spared them too, because he noticed that Griffin had the Baelith, which is basically a amulet he has. It's almost like a red egg amulet he has, and he notices Griffin has it, and he kind of warns Guts. He's man, this guy's gonna bring you bad juju if you keep hanging out with Griffin.
Right, and that egg, that's awesome that you bring that up, because it is an amulet or a token or a totem that somehow Griffith obtained, and they don't really talk a lot about how he gets it for a little while. But he shows it to Guts one time, and this egg is it's almost made out of, it almost looks like a human heart. And it has veins, and it's beating, and it has a mouth and eyes, and he hands it to Guts, and one of the eyes opens up and blinks at him, and he's nope, don't want to touch that, get that away from me. And freaky. Griffith just laughs it off, but it doesn't explain what it is, and you're why is Griffith so okay with that? He carries that around in his pocket, and I think he knows what it is at that time. He's just not sure entirely what it's for, but by the end of the series, oh yeah, you'll find out what it's for.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think at least in the movie, it says he got it from a salesman.
Or some random merchant.
Yeah, she gave it to him and said this necklace is meant for those who will be kings, or someone that will change the world, something along those lines.
This is you're right. Yeah, this is a show that's heavily built on prophecy. Everybody knows that something is coming, but the prophecy that's happening is so old that everybody actually doesn't even know what it is that they are prophesizing. Over time, so essentially what it really is that the people of this fantasy world, they believe in various gods and different religions, but through the length of time, people have forgotten that these entities that came down onto their earth, really they're not heavenly, they're demons, absolutely, and there's 4 of them, but over time they are recollected as angels, and people kind of mistake that and imbue them into their religions, and they worship them, but they don't even know what it is that they're worshiping. So it's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to just reading back to what you said about time skip, when Gus is riding the ranks, he does just become captain eventually of the Raider group, which is kind of a little side group of the Band of the Hawks.
Yep.
Yeah. So with that, they were actually hired by the kingdom to help them fight this century-long war, because they were the Band of the Hawk was doing so well as a mercenary group, so they're hired by them. And then this just goes back to Griffin's thing, because later he kind of explains to Guts. He kind of tells Guts that he has a desire to rule a kingdom of his own, and then he shows him the pendant and whatnot. And then Guts, kind of he understands that and respects that. They have a huge respect between each other, I think, because Griffin's never seen a fighter for like Guts before, and same with Guts. He's never seen a fighter like Griffin before.
Yeah, they really idolize each other in this weird way where they're friends, but also see each other kind of as a frenemy, I guess would be the best way to put it, where they want to push they want to push each other to be the best, but at the same time, they have to prove themselves to the other one, but their fighting styles are so different.
That one fight where Griffith actually beats Guts for the first time, and he's standing on top of Guts' sword with his sword to his face, and he's like, "I've got you. You can't win." Did not expect Guts to literally bite the sword tip, so he couldn't use it, and then he drops his sword, and they just go into hand-to-hand combat.
Right.
And yeah, it just shows like Guts is not as honorable as most other like anime swordsmen tend to be. He's just like, I will win at any cost. He's used like sand. He's used some deceptive tactics, but like he wants to win.
He's definitely a scrapper for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then that actually surprised me too with Griffin. He actually put up some finesse moves too. He kind of like got him like in an arm lock and kind of dislocated his shoulder real quick.
Yeah.
I did not expect him to.
He's fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also with that, going back to like the kingdom and whatnot. So basically, after some time of doing the work for the kingdom in the war here, like, it was like a century-long war. The king was just like, he started bringing the Hawks in more and kind of promised them like if they help him win the war, they kind of promised them to bring them in, kind of bring them nobility and whatnot, which is what like Griffin wanted. Yeah. So Griffin started mingling and with the more nobles and then he actually started equating himself with the king's daughter, Charlotte. So at this time too, Guts also began developing feelings for another member, Casca. Him and Casca started bonding a lot more during this time too. Then one night he kind of overhears Griffin talking to Charlotte about like considering like what he considers a friend. Basically, he considers someone with their own dream basically a friend. So Guts kind of overhears that and kind of starts thinking about himself, like what he wants to do with his life and whatnot. So Guts decides eventually, he's like, I'm gonna leave this group eventually and kind of better myself. I want to be like a really good swordsman and kind of find out his own thing. So eventually, the war eventually like ends, and they basically win the war for the king. And Guts kind of was like, yeah, cool, I'm gonna do what I said and just kind of dip out after the war. Costa kind of was like, what? And same with Griffin. When Griffin found out, he was very, very upset with that.
Right, because, Guts, again, he just wants to do, like you said, he wants to do his own thing. He wants to continue to be a mercenary. He doesn't want to be under anybody's thumb. So, and I remember, specifically, there was a part where, one of the generals is, handing out payment to all these people that helped fight in this war for the mercenaries, and he's in line, and he's like, hey, I can give you a really high-ranking position in this military if you want it. And he straight up is like, nope, I'd rather take the coin. And he just turns around, takes the coin, and walks away. It really is just about the victory for Guts and just the fight for survival. Oh man, it's like I said, it's brutal. There is that time where Guts, he infiltrates the castle on a mission to assassinate the king at the current the king at that current time, and the Band of the Hawk is downstairs celebrating their victory.
I don't think it's the king. It's the king's. It's the captain of the royal guard.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's right. The king. He's related to the king. Yeah. I know that, but he's not.
And basically, Guts really is one of those people that does fight for honor. Like, if you are a shitty person, he will absolutely hunt you down and be like, yo, you're a piece of shit. You don't deserve to live. And so, he infiltrates this castle without telling anybody. And he does sneak in successfully and assassinate this dude. But after... He does not realize that there was, I believe it was his son, that general's son. He a really young
Small
kid,
boy,
probably no older than 8 to 10, and he walks in, and Guts is hiding in the dark with his face covered, and he's like, oh shit. He doesn't realize that it's a kid at the time. He just thinks it's another person at the door, like a guard or something. So he comes out sword ready, and before he even realizes who it is, he's already pierced this kid's heart in his lungs with his sword, and he's like, what did I just do?
Right.
And now he has to fight his way out of the castle as this masked assassin, but almost everybody almost instantly is like, we think we know who this is. And the military starts to target the Band of the Hawk as enemies unexpectedly. They did not expect, they're just out having a good time, and they're going out to the field to go do battle, and suddenly they're getting fired upon by arrows and stuff, and there's members of this group just dying left and right, and they're like, why is this happening?
And it all stemmed from the fact that the captain of the Royal Knights didn't like Griffith because he was talking to the king's daughter.
Yep.
And he has a stuck-up mentality of, oh, we're better than you. You're just a lowly bandit. How dare you even talk to royalty? He actually attempts to kill Griffith with a poisoned arrow, but luckily the creepy pendant saves him from the arrow. And that moment, without even speaking, I guess Griffith like kind of nudges to Guts about like, hey, I need you to do something. So as much as like Guts wants to be his own guy, he still respects Griffith enough that he will literally carry out an assassination mission for him because this man disrespected you. So you want to take revenge.
Yeah.
And he could trust no one but Guts to do it.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and nobility looked down upon these guys because these guys are still mercenaries. They're just like low class kind of guys, and they're like, so the king was just like, we're gonna make you nobilities, but essentially if they win the war, and these guys, the other nobles are just like, no, we don't want these guys to be part of us. We don't want them. They look down upon these guys so bad.
Sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Looking down from your tower.
Right. But yeah, when Guts eventually, because they eventually won that, and Guts was leaving. Griffin actually kind of challenged Guts real quick. He's like, no, I don't want you to leave. We're going to do a quick like kind of duel thing. He's like, if you're going to leave, I'm going to have to fight you, man. So they fight, but then Guts just easily knocks the rapier out of Griffin's hand, and then is like, all right, I'm out, and just walks away.
Yeah, that level of strength. Now, it was done literally in a single blow. That fight was not even a competition. Like, they take poses on opposite ends of what they consider their battlefield. They go to strike each other, and Guts' sword being, this giant... I can't even imagine. Like you said, how many pounds was it? Like
the Dragon Slayer was like 400 pounds, but this one was like I wouldn't say this one was like half the size of that. Yeah,
right. So I mean, either way, this is well over like 150, 200-pound sword just made out of iron. And he takes one swing and he just knocks Griffith's sword out of his hand and immediately is like, "There, I won. I'm leaving." And he just like almost like doesn't even turn around. He just
knocks
keeps
it out and just walking. Yeah,
he just walks away.
Yeah, and Griffin took it as like a huge disrespect. And you can tell like he was hurt really bad by this defeat and Guts leaving. And he was so emotionally distraught by this, he actually like immediately runs to he immediately heads to like the king's the princess's kind of bedchamber that night and just like, hey. And kind of shagged her, And then while he was doing that, like a maiden found it, like kind of was watching and saw and kind of reported it to the king. So the king was just like, oh, you screwed my daughter, what the fuck, kind of thing. So like they had like a whole trap set up for them, and then as soon as Griffin tried to escape, they're just King's armies are all around him. He's like, oh fuck. So they got Griffin with there, and then basically they just kind of captured Griffin and kind of tortured him for a very long time. And then the king also branded the rest of the Hawks, basically just like, hey, these guys are basically traitors, these guys are just criminals, you guys can go ahead and kill them, kind of thing. And then that's where they ambushed the rest of the Hawks, and they were just like in that field, and they just kind of slaughtered them there. They're just like, hey, we have a mission for you guys, come to the field. I'm like, okay. All these guys come to the field, and then they're just ambushed by archers everywhere. I think there's only like the main cast basically for the band, the Hawks, survive. Everyone else is basically just wiped out at this point. And at this point too, Guts is already gone, so he already left on his thing after the fight. So I would say probably like a year or two, somewhere in time kind of passes. Guts overhears basically, he overhears about this thing that happened to the band of the Hawks. He's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to head back and try to find them. And so this whole time, Gus has just been training, working on his swordsmanship, and he came back to basically help his friends and try to rescue Griffin after he heard what happened to him. So he comes back, he meets Casca. They kind of have a little scuffle because Casca's kind of pissed that he left.
Yep.
But then, like, they reunite very quickly after the scuffle.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't be? Well, yeah, I mean, as soon as Guts leaves, like, the Band of the Hawk basically, like, loses that much power.
Right.
They are, like, really vulnerable. I mean, right, they're being hunted down by now a much stronger military force without Guts. And Griffith, I mean, yeah, still around, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, definitely.
All this came just because Griffith, wanted to get a little bit of a, royal something.
Yeah, right. Well, no, I will say too that like this anime is absolutely very graphic, very mature in terms of the content that it does show. There are a lot of either sexual scenes or scenes that are very hard to watch in terms of. I don't believe that there is exactly any scenes where I don't know, there might be some scenes where people force themselves onto other women, like high-ranking soldiers, onto younger women, or just women in like the peasant villages around. So do expect some nudity, just obviously anime boobs, cartoons, but it is really, really a mature show, and that is a theme that carries on, where it's not afraid to really push the boundaries of what exactly, like, I don't necessarily want to say what isn't art, but just they know that the audience is mature and they should be able to handle this, because that's just how things were in that time. They're not going to sugarcoat it. They want to show it just to show the level of brutality in this time.
Definitely. When we say dark anime, we mean dark anime.
Oh yeah, like it's some scenes are tough to watch. Like, I know we've brought up this earlier when you mentioned it, the breaking wheel.
Oh god. See, yeah, if you were to like take this in movie terms, this is definitely above rated R. Like this show is definitely like AO, like adults only. It is like they're just describing some of the torture and some of the scenes you will find in this anime and manga, and I can't watch that. No, it's a little too rich for my blood.
Some of it's makes me a little squeamish, but I have to watch it.
Definitely. So going back to the plot there, so Guts and Casca kind of team up after, they hook up because they came back, they reunited, they fought, they kind of hook up, and this is the first time you actually see Guts and, let his guard down with Casca, right? They kind of hook up and they make a little bond there, and basically them and a small group of PM members kind of go back and try to save Griffith from this torture chamber he's in, right? So they eventually do make their way down to Griffin. When they find him, like, Griffin was just like a husk of what he used to be.
He's deep down. Like, they have to enter this dungeon with stairs that just coil around the outside of this stairway for a long time, and it's a long journey down to this place. I remember that when they, like, you're right, when they do find him, he's in such a withered and decayed state that, like, he has like one of those like iron masks chained over his face. You can tell he's absolutely been tortured, not fed, not given water, missing potentially like body parts or fingernails. Oh man, brutal.
I believe the guy who tortured him said he severed all his tendons, so he couldn't really walk or move on his own. He was so hard
on like his ankles and his wrists and stuff, so he wouldn't be able to run even if he wanted to.
Nope. His tongue, I think, was cut out too, if I remember right.
Yes.
Yeah. So he couldn't talk either. So he's basically mute. He can't move. He's very malnourished. He's just basically skin and bones. And if you guys played Elden Ring, that I think it's the Wretch has that helmet on, right, Phil? The Wretch. It's like he has that helmet around his face.
Yeah.
It looks
that helmet.
Yeah, it's basically based off of Griffin, that preset there.
Yeah,
but
we're gonna go into that in a little bit here.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, they find him, and then like he's just like a former shell what he used to be. People realize he can't no longer can fight or do anything. So Guts carries him on his back to the group. After they escape, a couple days later, maybe not a couple days, but sometime later, Griffin actually overhears Casca and Guts kind of arguing about him, talking about him. So Griffin feels like shit. He knows he can't do shit. He just feels like he's finally free, but he's like, man, I can't fight. I can't pick up a sword. I can't take care of myself.
He's so weak and powerless. Yeah. There's a scene that I remember that was, honestly, it was, I don't want to say moving, but it really was just devastating to finally understand the level of mental decay that Griffith suffered through all of this, where he knows his arms are so weak that he has to try to prove to himself that he can hold himself up over like a jagged tree branch.
Right.
And he's like holding himself up, but legit, like that tree branch, he's so weak it begins to push into his throat, and he's almost ready to just let himself die if he can't. Hold himself up. He seems he's useless. And then to know that Guts is one of the people that saved him, that's devastating to him.
Yeah, definitely. So with that tree root, he actually tries to commit suicide on that. So he takes off in a wagon and crashes into a river where he finds that tree root and whatnot. So he's like, man. So he actually tries to kill himself. He's in such a bad state of despair that, but he actually fails killing himself, right? And then misses and cuts his throat, but he's not like severely where he dies, but he cuts his throat and he starts bleeding, right? He actually finds his bailiff that he lost in that river, right? See, it took him. He lost it sometime during his imprisonment time, and he finds it in this river, and his blood actually drops on top of like this bailiff, which unintentionally activates it, right? So activating it basically triggers an event called the Eclipse.
Yep.
So the Eclipse basically transports all the Hawks to this another dimension. It's like a hellish, almost like hellish dimension where they encounter like the archdemons you were talking about earlier.
It's like the ground is almost made out of flesh.
Yeah, it's like skull heads.
Monsters are just naturally in the hills or are the hills. And oh man, it's gross. And yeah, he activates that amulet and it brings in that eclipse. Now this eclipse was something from in that demon realm that was prophesized to have happened. What do they call it? It's like the eclipse of a dying sun was something that I believe they described it as. And in that hellish nightscape that they enter, they finally realize the 4 demons that were actually stated in their holy texts as angels reveal themselves for who they are, and that they are about to witness like the birth of the demon king, essentially the one who's going to lead them all and lead the realm into another age of darkness, and that is Griffith by the use of that amulet that activates. But there is something he has to do in order to fully become the demon king that will put him in this place of power that now he desires more than absolutely nothing else, because of how weak he was, knowing that the person who beat him before and left him is the one who saved him but was also a friend. So not only did he break his heart, but he broke his spirit, he broke his will to live, and now he just wants to rule everything and put everyone in their place.
Yeah, that's part of the deal with the whole thing is with the sacrifice. So basically these 4 archdemons pop up, are known as the God Hand, right? They basically give Griffin the deal. They're like, hey, we'll give you whatever you want. We'll give you your power. We'll give you all of that. But you have to sacrifice those that mean the most to you, the closest to you. The reason why they do that is because it basically helps him separate his humanity. So basically, it transcends him basically from being a human to a demon, essentially, is what they want. So Griffin's like, you know what? Fuck it, let's do it, kind of thing. And so all of his friends, including Guts and Costco, got branded with this mark. This mark is known as the brand of the sacrifice, right? So basically, that mark anoints those for the evocation of doom, basically, which is a sacrificial ceremony we're talking about, which those who are consecrated by the laws of casualty transcend their humanity, resulting in the creation of an apostle or a God Hand member. So the lives of those who are sacrificed are usually someone really close to the person who summons them, and they're often sacrificed to creatures of darkness, and they're very brutally murdered. In the case of God Hand members, anyway, like the deceased life life force is used to basically help transition the summoner into the next level of demon, basically what he becomes.
So like you said with that, the brand of sacrifice, so it's all of the members of the band of Hawk, the band of the Hawk that are the surviving members of all of the events that have led up to this. The band of the Hawk, they followed Griffith with fierce loyalty, and they were absolutely willing to lay their lives down for this man, to see him, either become king or become a person of power. But when it comes down to the fact that Griffith is like, I'm sacrificing you to achieve my own goal, they don't realize what that level of sacrifice is. So they receive this brand, which is given to them, through the transformation of him trying to become the Demon King. And this brand marks them for death in ways that demons are attracted to it, and they can in turn can also sense when demons are nearby because of this brand. Usually I think it was on the forehead that you saw most people receive the brand. Guts is on the back of his neck, and I think Casca's is on her chest.
Yeah, I think it's on her chest.
And so everybody who's in this, this nightmare world is just being hunted down by demons that are larger than life, and they literally are ripping these guys in half and chewing them with just massive maws. And these things have powers and abilities that are inconceivable. Some of them don't even look humanoid. They're just flesh blobs of whips that can transform into various spikes and stuff and pierce through you, and then they'll drag you with these little pointy whip things into their giant mouth and consume you that way. Just really, really intense stuff to watch.
It is. It's very brutal. Basically, at the end of that, sacrifice, almost everyone's slaughtered except for Gus and Casca, right? There's only 2 that kind of survived this first initial onslaught. But Griffin, that's enough for Griffin to be reborn as the 5th member of the God Hand. He's called as, I believe, Femto is what his transformation is called. So basically, Griffin's he sees these 2 still alive, so he kind of goes down and takes Casca, and kind of Griffin sees this, and Griffin was fucking pissed and angry at this point. He's just running, fighting through demons. He's like, no, not Casca.
This is it's really uncomfortable, hard to watch scene. I mean, I'm not going to get too much into it, but there to the point where this new form of Griffith is touching her in ways where she's like bound and like completely helpless, and
he basically just violates her. Guts.
Very much so. But like Guts witnesses it, and he just keeps going, not because he wants to, but because he knows it's gonna piss Guts off.
He just does it to prove his dominance and to prove his point. It's like, I'm the powerful one still. Yep. What's up, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And Guts, like this moment here, I thought was really cool. Guts was like, no, don't touch her. He kind of a demon like bit down Guts' arm, right? And Guts was like, no, I'm going to stop you from touching Casca no matter what. And he's trying to fight through, but this huge demon has his jaws wrapped around Guts' arm. And Guts has a sword. He tries to, attack the demon. The sword breaks. So it's just like a dull piece of metal.
Yep.
Guts is like, no. And he just hacks away his arm with just the dull part of the sword. And just, you see this point where he pulls his arm out. And you see the flesh tear and the bones just like rip out. And he just rips his arm out of this demon's jaw. Doesn't phase him at all. He just runs straight at Griffin. He's like, I'm gonna kill you, kind of thing. Yep. You see in his face like he's gonna kill. Like, oh yeah. But then another demon, another demon pins him down by the head and kind of pulls his like face open and like has a claw in one of his eyes and rips like his eye up. Basically, and makes him watch. Essentially holds him down as he watches. So he is forced to watch this whole thing. You see Guts just like cry up and tear up, and he's just like, oh man. The only reason they survived that was because another guy named the Skull Knight just shows up on horseback and kind of saves them from this hellish world, and it kind of brings them back to like their normal realm they're in.
I need to go to my happy place right now. That sounds terrible. Like just imagining all that. Like as much as I have never watched or read Berserk, I kind of knew that. Like I knew Griffith does something terrible. Like I kind of knew about that because another buddy of ours is a huge Berserk fan, and I'm pretty sure he's told me about that before. But happy place, please.
Absolutely. And so that largely is how the show, at least that first series ends, is where the prophecy is fully, recognized. The fifth member, the Demon King, arrives. All 5 of these demons are now let loose, essentially, and they really do proclaim that, a new age of darkness has come to the realm of humanity, and that more is yet to come. But until that time is ready, Casca and Guts are able to essentially survive the night. And like you said, they escape with their lives, but not necessarily unscathed. Casca ends up losing all of her memories. She is horrified and so scared and traumatized of the stuff that happens that she becomes almost completely helpless and needs to rely on other people to take care of her. Her mental state is not there. She doesn't remember who she is, what happened. It's absolutely crazy. And that leads into the 2016 series, which I guess not really the story does progress quite a bit with this, where I haven't finished and I'm still in the middle of this. I got right up to season 2. Phenomenal series so far. The animation is a little wonky, just in terms of it's like that stereoscopic kind of 3D effect. Kind of, where it's CG, but then it has an effect over it that tries to make it look hand-drawn.
Right. It's not good CG.
No.
It's like the movies itself, the 3 movies were actually phenomenal. Not bad. Yeah.
See, that's what I thought when I first started those movies. I'm like, oh no, not this type of animation. But then I've noticed it kind of progressively gets away from that and goes to more traditional, but they still try to mix that in there.
You can definitely see it with the still shots too. There's sometimes still shots that look really nice. But like the 2016, 2017 ones, I feel like if they would have done those the way they did like the movies, it would have been perfectly okay with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is where like some of the, again, some more squeamish parts come up, like we mentioned, the breaking wheel, which comes up pretty early in the series, where it's just to reiterate how tough these times are. Well, now these people again are separated into castes of basically the faithful and the faithless, and the people that are among the faith, the church or the holy religion, are seeking out anybody who does not believe, calling them heretics, and they will sacrifice them akin to not necessarily like putting them on the cross, but they put them on what's called the breaking wheel. They will tie you down to like this rack, and in between this rack there are like several open spaces spaces where they just slam down this really heavy looking, almost like a pirate ship kind of looking wheel.
Yeah, it's like a giant wagon wheel kind of essentially. Yeah,
and they, oh my goodness, like they just shatter every bone in your body, and then they post you up on like a post on top of the wheel, like a spoke for everybody to see as you bake in the sun.
Right. Yeah, I did not like what was his name, that priest? What was his name?
Father Moses.
Yeah, he was kind of an asshole, but like the way he did things, like he was,
well, he's super devout, and like he claims he is the most devout. Like the first time you meet him, he is literally like, you know, people do repentance, or like they do like 1,000 Hail Marys, that kind of thing. He's just bowing over and over again on the floor of his temple, but he's not just bowing, he is literally slamming his head into the ground as hard as he can. And when you first meet him, they're like, he does this 1,000 times a day, every single day, without fail. And he is this insanely muscular dude who has so many scars from, you know, showing, quote, like his faith, how devout he is.
Yeah, he would have people like repent for the sins in a very bad way. Like you'll see like a torture chamber, basically is what they do for repenting. Like, they're like, oh yeah, we can help you out, but you gotta basically repent and do this stuff. And it's just like hardcore torture where like we're talking about like coals on your body, like people getting skewered, you know, people just tied up against like a chair with just getting flesh kind of ripped off their skin and stuff like that.
Flaying and all sorts of stuff.
And then you see people getting burned at the stake too, the heretics they call it. You see people getting stoned, you see people getting burned. Oh man, that's crazy.
Yeah, we've gone over pretty much like a great amount of the plot point so far, but what do we have information about the author?
Oh, we've got so much. I guess any final statements about the show before we move on to that? Did you have any other points you want to bring up? I mean, I think we covered most of it.
We had most of it for like not the prequels, but like the early on to get you a good point to watching the 2016-2017 series.
Yeah, that's the series where it's still, we believe it's still ongoing. There may be, may not potentially be a third season of this. We're still unsure. But yeah, again, that animation is kind of strange. But because of the events of that first series, this is almost an entirely other world where now there's monsters and demons that just roam around freely. There's fairies and pixies and all sorts of just weird magical things that did not exist in the first one. And it's interesting, too, because this one almost has a little bit of levity sometimes where there's like some humor, but it's not necessarily overtly funny, like the little blue fairy pixie thing. I don't remember. It's like
Puck, I believe his name was.
Puck, yeah. It's I don't necessarily want to say funny, but it's just, it's so strange how it almost doesn't seem like it fits in that world.
Oh yeah. And yeah, my bad. Just to end this too with that brand, the Mark Guts can no longer, he can't really sleep at night because like that mark actually brands him to be hunted like at night, when at night demons come after him. So he's basically not sleeping at night. He's just fighting demons off every night for the rest of his basic life.
Yeah, every time like a demon comes around or something, I believe his mark like starts bleeding and he can like sense that they're there. And it's really interesting. I like that that's there because he uses that to his advantage too. When he's hunting something, he'll be like, it's close by, I can feel it, and like his neck will start bleeding.
Yeah, and the stronger the demon, the more pain he is in too, the more he bleeds.
Yep. And that's the series where he utilizes a lot of his mechanical arm with like his crossbow and his like, it's got like it's almost like a grenade launcher that comes out of his hand. It's really interesting. Man, yeah, if you haven't seen any of this, I heavily encourage you to, but again, you've got to have the stomach for it. It is a dark, uneasy, queasy anime to watch. But let's really get into the creator of this series, Kentaro Meora. Now this man, he is absolutely a legend beyond belief. He has some of the most pedigree, the highest level of quality stuff you could ever imagine, ever since he was a little kid. Unfortunately, regrettably, may he rest in peace forever, he did pass away in 2021. So he did at least get to see what some of his creation led to with the 2016-2017 anime, but he really didn't have a whole lot to do with that other than the storyline itself. The other anime, the actual one, he did do a lot of work with that. But let's talk about Kentaro Meora. Kentaro Meora, born on July 11th, 1966 in Chiba, the Chiba prefecture in Japan. If you don't know where that is, it's right, Japan is kind of shaped like it's kind of curved from north to south, and it kind of leans into the southwest. Chiba is literally on like the very edge of that bend, like right where it starts right there. That's right where Chiba is. He started his career as a mangaka at the early age of 10 in 1976.
Oh wow.
He created his first manga ever called Mioranger. It's like his last name. There is no information, pictures about this. It was published in his local school publication, and it actually ended up spanning over 40 volumes. I mean, he just did this like, at school for funsies.
At 10?
Yeah, at 10. Wow. Yeah. There's no information of it. In 1977, he went on to create his second manga called The Way to the Sword, or it was a Ken no Michi. It was another manga series with no available images or information found online. All of this is really hard to find. The manga series was the first time Meora did use what was called India ink. India ink at that time was mostly used for writing and printing, but it's like a professional level ink, and this is shortly, like he was like 11 years old trying to use professional level techniques, but by 1979 Meora was already using the professional level drawing techniques. Like he had almost perfected it. So quite literally he was 13 making stuff that like most adults couldn't even achieve. In 1982, during high school, Meora enrolled into an artistic curriculum where he and his other classmates started publishing their own works in the school booklets. Again, seems to be a pretty popular theme there of doing it yourself. It was there that he became friends with another mangaka named Koji Mori. The pair submitted their own, it's called a doujinshi. It's a Japanese term for like self-published works, essentially. He submitted those to Weekly Shonen Sunday. The series wasn't unfortunately accepted during the last rounds of the selected works for publication, but at the age of 18, Meora briefly worked as the assistant to George Morikawa. If you don't know who he is, he's known for Hajime no Ippo, which is a fairly famous one that I have watched, really good. Within a short time, Morikawa actually dismissed him from his mentorship because he straight up said he had nothing left to teach him. He's like, You have all of the skills of a master, and there's nothing more you could learn from me. You just need to get out there and do it. And it was around that time that I know in his portfolio, he already started to have the idea of a gigantic sword-wielding dark swordsman in his portfolio. I do have a quote from him. In high school, I was in a group full of people saying they wanted to be manga artists, but they were actually busy getting girlfriends and getting into fights, so they weren't really all that otaku. So I basically, the biggest manga nerd out of the bunch, it was a group of 5, and I was pretty much the Yellow Ranger of the group, lagging behind in terms of emotional growth, but way ahead of the others in terms of drawing ability. I wasn't capable of making a story that would really make anyone feel much of anything, though. And that was an interview with Yukari Fujimoto in the year 2000. I did find this on skullknight.net via Berserk.fandom wiki interviews. There's a ton of interviews that were translated there by him, by many people. Really great source of information. In 1985, Meora applied for the entrance to the Art of College of Nihon University, abbreviated as Nichidai. For his entrance to the university, he submitted a short project called Futatabi, or it's called Once More. Now, this project, this is where it was the key to his admission, because the same project also earned him the 34th Newcomer Award from Weekly Shonen Magazine, so now we're starting to see people recognizing his work for what it is. But it was in 1988 while illustrating for a project written by Yoshiyuki Okamura. You also might know him if you've heard of the name Burenson or Sho Fumimura, which are actually just Okamura's pen names. But he was working on a project for him called The King of Wolves. Meora published the early prototype of Berserk in Hakusensha's monthly Kamikami. The prototype consisted of only 48 pages and was enough to win him second place in the Kamikami's 7th manga school competition. It was in Hakusensha's monthly Animal House in 1989. This is big. Animal House sticks around with him for a while. In 1989, that Berserk actually got its full serialization. In 1992, monthly Animal House was renamed to Young Animal, where Berserk continued to release. In that same year, Meora once again collaborated with Burenson as the illustrator on the manga called Japan. Now, this is really interesting. I do have a little bit about Japan, where So it's really strange. It is one of the most bizarre stories I've really heard. It's about a Yakuza and a TV reporter that fall in love. But this TV reporter was reporting on some project about how the Japanese lifestyle is very similar to an older... what is it, like an older country that used to exist that was heavily dominated by European countries, or no, not European countries, but by the Roman Empire. And they're like, if we continue with this way of thinking, is what she was saying during this interview. She's like, if we continue with this line of thinking, we are absolutely going to get, the same treatment they did, where they were wiped out by Rome. And we're going to see this. Once that happens, actually, all of these, it's like ghosts that transport them into the future and show them what happens to Japan because of that. And effectively what happens is Japan disappears almost entirely as a people, as a country. It like completely floods and it is no more. But all of the survivors of Japan actually immigrate into Europe, into like Russian territories and stuff as they flee, to try to save themselves. But in that scenario, they actually find themselves end up becoming more street beggars and slaves. And it was a really hard time. But that series Japan, really interesting. It was a really interesting plot. Now, I do also want to mention The King of Wolves, which was another one that he worked on with Bjornsson beforehand. That was one of the first ones that he got to work on like a professional level. It was about a young historical scholar named Iba who disappears while on a lone expedition to study the ancient Silk Road. A year later, his girlfriend Kyoko sets out for the Silk Road in order to find clues that will help to unravel the mystery of Iba's disappearance. When she arrives, she finds the charm she gave Iba for protection, and moments later she is sucked into a black vortex and loses consciousness. Kyoko awakes to find herself in a very different place and discovers that Iba is not only alive, but is a warrior slave under the reign of Genghis Khan in 13th century Mongolia. At last, Iba and Kyoko reunite. They find that there is a series of fates crueler than the ones that they've already endured, leading up to that moment. So honestly, there's quite a few, at least in terms of King of Wolves, there's quite a few different similarities between the Berserk plot and King of Wolves, where I know that in other interviews he mentioned that he did draw some inspiration from other mangas that he worked on for Berserk. And it's just really interesting because, again, it's another story of suffering that only leads to more suffering. It's another manga that does not have a happy ending. Another famous work from Bjornsson, which I mentioned earlier, is Fist of the North Star, which was from 1983 to 1988. That was with artist Tetsuo Hara, which is one of the best-selling manga in history with over 100 million copies in circulation. Fist of the North Star was absolutely another source of inspiration for Berserk, just in terms of this another brutal lifestyle, but not about necessarily a swordsman. Anyway, I'll get back to Meora. In 1997, he supervised the production of 25-episode adaptation of Berserk, which was produced by OLM Inc., headquartered in Setagaya, Tokyo, Japan. It aired on NTV, or Nippon TV. OLM is also the same production company that did... Can you think of it? Do you know what it is? I bet you totally do. You're gonna know it when I say it. Pokemon.
Oh, okay.
OLM did Pokemon. They have a bunch. Yes, they have a bunch of shows that I'm like, what are these? None of them made it to the United States. They're all lesser known TV shows, but then hidden there's Berserk and then Pokemon, and that's what put them on the map. Absolutely. And they still, I'm pretty sure, oversee Pokemon now in terms of the production. In 1999, Meora supervised the creation of the Dreamcast video game, The Sword of the Berserk, Guts Rage, which is an action hack and slash game. I watched 2 hours of gameplay of this. It absolutely reminded me of Zelda Ocarina of Time in terms of its gameplay, its discovery, its overworld was very similar to that kind of style of swordplay.
And Berserk, there's a lot of inspiration. Berserk inspired so many different things. Phil, can you tell us about some influences?
Oh man, yeah, there's a lot of inspiration here. So, 2 big things. The first one being, according to the writer and editor Kazushi Shimada, series like Full Metal Alchemist, Attack on Titan, Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, or Jujutsu Kaisen would not have existed if it wasn't for Berserk. Some dark fantasy manga authors have also declared influences from Berserk, including Hajime Isayama, I'm so sorry if I butcher any of these, the author of Attack on Titan, Kazui Kato, Blue Exorcist, Yana Tobuso, Black Butler, and other authors influenced by Berserk include Makoto Yukimura from Vinland Saga, Yuki Tabata from Black Clover, Ryugo Narita from Bakano?
Yep, Bakano. He also did Durarara. Yep.
And Adi Shankar, the 2017 Castlevania showrunner, said in an interview that he would like to adapt Berserk, calling the hyper-detailed beauty of Miura's artwork a true masterpiece, while Adam Dietz, the Castlevania assistant director, stated that the show was inspired mostly by Berserk.
Yep. Dude, I would love to see that.
Hey, a couple other ones I did find. Devil May Cry, Dante.
The
Absolutely.
Anime,
Not even just the anime, the game in general.
That's great that you
Final
mentioned that,
Fantasy VII, Cloud. Yep. Absolutely.
I got this right here that Berserk, besides just a number of anime that he also, that the anime inspired, Berserk also inspired a number of video games, like you said, Devil May Cry, like Dante specifically. Yep. The Final Fantasy VII with Cloud and his Buster Sword. Yep. A huge inspiration to the Dark Souls franchise, Bloodborne, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, and also Elden Ring. That little indie game that is making all the rage right now.
Little indie game.
There's actually a lot of monsters and bosses that are almost like point for point. Recreations of monsters from the Berserk manga. And there's a lot of hidden Easter eggs in there, including one of the final bosses. I can't remember which Dark Souls game specifically had this, but a enemy that is 100% just based off guts. Big, black sword, his fighting style. You fight him in just a barren wasteland. It's really cool.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's see here. There's actually a weapon in Elden Ring called the Dragon Slayer, and it's just a giant great sword that's obviously taken inspiration from the Berserk. Basically, like we were saying, the Dark Souls games are heavily influenced on it, and you can just tell just by playing it. It's very, very, very similar.
Yeah. Oh man!
I just want to inject real quick. I think it's just called the Great Sword.
Is it just the Great Sword?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think a lot of it's just end up mostly implied. But if you can put the pieces together,
it looks just like the Dragon Slayer.
Absolutely, it plays homage to him. Now, back in 2002, Meora received the award for excellence at the 6th Tezuka Osamu Cultural Prizes for Berserk. The Tetsu Osamu Cultural Prize is a yearly manga prize awarded to manga artists for their works that follow what's called the Osamu Tezuka manga approach, which was founded and sponsored by a person named Asahi Shinbun. He's a very respected newspaper. Sorry, that wasn't a person. That was a newspaper. My bad. The name of the newspaper, Asahi Shinbun. The award started in 1997 and is still a highly prestigious award. This is where it's given, named after the person who created the award, Osamu Tezuka, who also used to be called, or is still known to this day, as the father or godfather or the god of manga. Like, quite literally, almost everybody that ever created manga recognizes that he was some of the first and the best person to perfect a technique that gave manga the edge that it did to take off the ground and become this international phenomenon that we have in books and stuff today. We might not be reading these stories at all if it wasn't for that guy. In 2006, Berserk was frequently and extended on multiple hiatuses and had a really he really didn't have a consistent schedule. It didn't necessarily say why, but I think it must have just been really taking a toll on him, because this has been a long time in this work of this one singular creation. And then by the year 2018, really big gap in there in terms of the story as Berserk. Berserk was finally collected into 40 tankobon, which they consider a book that's not part of an anthology. So I don't know if that, it is a series, but I don't think there's going to be more beyond that. It is what it is, and that's beginning to end. It's done. So
I think he's from what we have out right now from the manga, I think it's about for the story of Berserk, it's about I wouldn't say 60% finished from what I've looked online when I read. Yeah.
However, after that, there really isn't much more to tell between the year 2018 and May 6th, 2021. Meora did die of, it was considered acute aortic dissection, which was an issue with his heart where a valve tore. It was very unexpected. It wasn't something that, like, people were seeing coming. He still thought he had a bright future ahead of him. That was at the age of 54 at that time. Man, I can't believe how influential this man was on so many things that we all know and love today, and it's still influencing things that we know and love with ongoing series or other big series. Like you mentioned, Black Clover is absolutely one that I really want to get more into. I have seen some of it, but I did put that on pause to start watching some of these other shows. Just phenomenal man, true master.
Now, Brent, you were telling me about some music before.
Yes.
Wasn't there like a band or something that was very heavily inspired?
There is. Oh, they're just not inspired. All of their work, literally every single song, is either named from an event that happens in Berserk, or lyrics that are straight up from the things that happen in Berserk. They have quotes from Berserk in there. That band is called Brand of Sacrifice. So if you don't like, I know we mentioned in our last episode, we definitely like some heavier music. This might be a little beyond Phil's taste. I think Aiden would be definitely a little more into it, just for what is it, DCM, whatever the hell that crap is. I'm not gonna play any music on here because YouTube got all pissed off as soon as we put it on there. Like, you don't own that. Like,
30 seconds, YouTube.
I know. I didn't claim that I owned it. This is for history, damn it. But if you love like heavier music, that is, I mean, they're ruthless. They are on the top of their game in terms of like the deathcore industry. If you want some guys that are really fresh, really original, super heavy, absolutely Brand of Sacrifice, one of my favorite bands of all time. I could listen to all of their albums, and in fact I have many times at work for hours. Man, I think that really about wraps it up for everything that we've got on Berserk today. Did you guys have anything else before we start our closing statements?
One last thing, just because of the music portion. Absolutely, you did mention Brand of the Sacrifice. There's a little bit of here that Aiden did some great research on.
Ooh, yeah.
Finnish heavy metal band Battle Beast have written songs all about Berserk, including several of their 2013 self-titled album. When guitarist Anton Kabanen left Battle Beast in 2015, he formed Beast in Black and continues to write songs based on the series.
Cool.
We talked about the Brand of Sacrifice. And also, in 2021, the deathcore band Slaughter to Prevail. I've seen a little bit of their stuff. Not my cup of tea, but they are definitely a heavier side of things.
Yep, yeah. If you like Slaughter to Prevail, they're a lot like Brand of Sacrifice. I love Slaughter to Prevail. They're a Russian band. The gentleman who is like the front man for that band, he has like his own brand that's very well known for this demon mask that he wears, and you can actually buy this mask. It's really cool. It's really scary looking though. Like, it's very basic in its shape, but fans of that band wear that mask like with pride. It's amazing to see.
They did release their song Zavali Abalo, which featured scenes from the 1997 Berserk anime series in their music video. It's, like you said, it's everywhere. Video games, anime, music. It's a very old series, but it's one of those series that has absolutely impacted series to date. Like, all the older shows, like Dragon Ball comes to mind, as another big anime that helped inspire a lot of newer upcoming series and mangaka. And it's just really cool to see something like that have such a huge impact and creating even more stories and types of entertainment that we love today.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic. Well, hey, I think that's about going to do that for us here today. Aiden, did you have anything else?
Real quick, I just want to say, I really thought it was cool the way he did his demons. He did, I think it's called anthropomorphism. Basically, where you get the demons human traits. If you notice that in his demons, they allow them to have human face or human teeth to make them really creepy.
Right.
Yeah, I just like that. It's just so cool that he did that. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, and that's great that you bring that up, because that is a thing with the human psyche where we're naturally like we have this fear of things that are like humans but not necessarily humans. Like there's a lot of research that actually goes into that. It's really interesting, and that's great that you mentioned that, because again, all these demons really are in some way humanoid, and they're just truly the stuff of nightmares.
This show has definitely made me, like, all the talking we did today, I feel like I definitely need to go home and like watch some cartoons and get into a nice happy place.
Yeah, watch you need a what's that called? You need a palate cleanser. Yeah, you need something to
go watch some Monster Musume, Phil.
No. Stop it.
It's a good show.
Never gonna happen.
Oh my goodness. I don't even know if I'll get to that show ever. It's not quite my thing, but you do you. That's totally fine. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I want to give a huge thank you to Calvin Rosario for the creation of our anime avatars. You can find those on our Instagram, Twitters, maybe some of our Facebook page at the Men of Zen, or you can find those links to our personal profiles there. You can find Calvin Rosario at Calvin_Rosario_art on Instagram. Another huge shout out to Schminkadelic for the use of our theme song. You can find more of his dance and trance music on Spotify and Apple Music. Again, thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you again on April 420, baby. Yeah. I think we might have decided what we're gonna do. Are we set on Food Wars?
I'll be down, and I think if we do Food Wars, I think we're gonna add a little special thing for the YouTube channel.
Hopefully, we'll have to see how the information comes out, because we were gonna do Violet Evergarden, but that didn't quite work out because there's literally nothing about the creator of that show. Literally, we don't even know if it's a boy or a girl.
I think it is a girl, but that's about it.
There's literally nothing. You go to their bio and it's just made Violet Evergarden. We don't even know if that's their real name. We don't know. No one does. It's crazy. Anyway, thank you again so much for listening, and we will talk to you again on April 20th. Until next time, stay zen.
Hey guys, this is Phil here. Thank you so much for checking out the second episode of the Men of Zen podcast. If you want to check out some of our other pages, we do have a YouTube channel. It is the Men of Zen. We upload the videos same day as Spotify and iHeartRadio. It is the Men of Zen. Also, check me out on my personal page, Phil vs. the World, on Instagram.
Hi there, this is Aiden. You can check me out on my personal page as well. On my Instagram, it's going to be EarthCat91, and I do have a TikTok. It is demon_Neko91.
And once again, thank you so much for checking us out. There's a lot of really fun stuff coming up in the future, and we're really excited to show you. But until then, stay zen.